Okay, we're going to continue talking about Greek art. And so today we're going to start off with some Greek architecture. Write down this definition. We're going to look at some temples, and a temple is a place where the priest would talk to the gods. In our world, what do we call a temple? Usually it's a church or a synagogue or a mosque, all right? And who can go into a church, a synagogue, or a mosque? And it's basically anybody can. But back in the Greek times that we're looking at, only the priests could go in there. Regular people were not allowed to go into the temple. And so if you wanted to talk to the gods, you would have to talk to the priests. You could not talk to the gods directly. All right. I also want you to know the term facade, F-A-C-A-D-E. It looks like it says facade, but it's pronounced facade. And that's the front of a building. Right there is a photograph or image of the facade of a temple. And back then, 2,000 years ago, they painted their temples. But since then, the paint is relatively washed off. All right. So there are in Greece, there are hundreds and hundreds of temples and ruins all around the country there. Uh, it's kind of like when I went to England and Ireland. Everywhere I looked in England and Ireland, there was another castle. It's kind of like that. That these old ruins are still around and still available. That's the Temple of Aphaea, and that's the Temple of Juno. There's the Temple of Selinus and Aegina. Doric is one of your vocabulary words, and a Doric column is one of the oldest types of columns. It's a very simple column, and it has this is what's called the capital. In fact, I think capital is one of your words. Anyways, um, but I want you to draw this picture right here. I want you to draw this. It's almost like a little rectangle, and it's like a long, thin rectangle. And then above it, it's almost like a side view of a bowl or a plate under it, and then you have the column that's with these vertical lines, and then there's no base down here. Notice that? All right. And this is what a Doric column looks like at the top. Here's some more Doric columns. It's a very simple column. And Doric columns are still being used today. I mean, this is a piece, this is a modern architecture. It looks like the Cincinnati Gas and Electric building, and they used Doric columns on their building. And then here's the Ionic column. Ionic column is a little bit fancier. It's taller, it's thinner, it's stronger. Let me write down my time. It's what, 3 o'clock to 3:40. All right. It's taller, more ornate, and stronger. And then up here, the definition for ionic is I want you to draw this little curly Q up here. So there's a little curl, it goes around and it goes across and then it comes back around. It's almost like looking at a side view of a scroll or two waves facing each other. And then it has these tall, thin column. And then at the bottom, it has a base. So there's the top of a ionic column. There's some ionic columns, and notice that they have a base down here. And notice that they're really tall and have that scroll at the top. And ionic columns are still being used in architecture today. I found this photograph of this building, and it's a modern building, and it still has ionic columns. All right, recently, I had one of my students. She traveled to Greece and brought back a lot of photos, and this is one of the most interesting photos that she brought back to me. And it shows a column that has fallen, but look how it broke apart. Do you see how even these cuts are? And that tells me that the columns are stacked up like drums on top of each other. In fact, if you go back to this, it shows it like this is a drum. And if you were to stack drums on top of each other, they would make a column. And that's what these are. And then also this other photograph that she brought to me, look at these holes that are inside of the drum. And what they would do is they would have these holes and then fill it with a piece of wood that sticks out. And the other piece of stone that comes on top of it also has the exact same hole so that the piece of wood goes into it too. And they fit together almost like Legos fit together. All right, I want you to write this term and definition down. An acropolis is the highest point of a city. And right here we have this big hill jutting out of this city, and then on top of it is built a temple. And we're going to look at the Acropolis at Athens, and I want you to write down this definition too. The Phidias is the architect of the Acropolis at Athens. Phidias. And there's this hill that just juts out right out of the middle of Athens, and that's where the ancient, excuse me, Athenians built their temples on top of that hill. And here's an aerial view of it. And in a second, we'll see that temple right there. That's another temple that's close by. In fact, there it is. All right, that's the Acropolis at Athens. And then this is the another temple. That's that temple that was right there. So we're going to be standing like about right there. And this is what my student brought back. Look how absolutely massive those columns are. You know, compare it to this person right here. These things are just absolutely gigantic. This is a computer model of what the Acropolis at Athens would have looked like 2,000 years ago. That building right there, that's the Parthenon, and that's Athena's temple. That is the Propylaea. That's the main entrance into the temple or the Acropolis at Athens. That right there is called the Erechtheum. And I know this says number one, number two, and number four. It's missing number three, but don't worry about that. This number three building is not something that we're going to study. But that's the Erechtheum right there. That's the Temple of Nike. And here is a 3D model of what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago. And then here is a drawing of what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago. All right, the definition of the Parthenon is Athena's temple at the Acropolis at Athens. Write this down in your notes. Pause the video if you have to. It's one of the most famous buildings in the world. When you think about famous architecture, the Parthenon stands right up there with one of the most famous ones. So these are different views. So that's the front view. That's the facade of the Parthenon. That's the back view of it, the back corner. That's the back view of it. And then that's the side view. And do you notice the scaffolding that they have there? Well, the current Parthenon is under reconstruction right now. It's been under reconstruction for over like 10 years, and they're trying to put the building back together again. So if you go and visit it now, you'll see a lot of scaffolding. This right here, this is an exact copy of the building, what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago, and this is in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you can't afford to go all the way over to Greece to visit the Parthenon, you can at least afford to go to Nashville, Tennessee, and see it there. All right, and the purpose of this slide is to show you how this thing kind of got blown up. So here's a map of Greece, and there is Athens, and the Turks had control of Athens, and the Venetians were attacking Athens. And this was in 1687. And the Turks had stored all their ammunition inside of the temple. And you can see in this drawing done at the time that it still had a roof. Do you see it? The roof is right up here on Athens. And so the Turks were keeping all their ammunition stored in there, and the Venetians got in a lucky shot with a bomb, and the whole thing exploded. And that's what caused it to be to look like it does now. All right, so inside the Parthenon would have been a giant statue of Athena because the Acropolis honors Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. A giant statue of her, and that's what it would have looked like. So that's a drawing of it, that's a sculpture of it. And then if you go into the Parthenon that's in Nashville, they have a copy of it there, and that's how big it would have been. Golden relief sculptures at the bottom. All right, this is the Erechtheum at the side. We're going to focus on that little part right there, which is called the Porch of Maidens. And if you look, that's the other side of it. And if you look real close at the Porch of Maidens, there's these columns that are shaped like women, and those are called caryatids. And I want you to write down the definition here. Caryatid is a column in the shape of a woman. They look like. Now, notice that some things that are wrong with it, like their faces are kind of messed up and their arms are missing and they're not in the best of shape. And then there's these metal bars holding the roof up so that this doesn't collapse. What they've done is they've taken the caryatids out of their original place at the Erechtheum and put them in a museum. And then they've made concrete copies of them and put them in the place where the caryatids used to be. All right, another area of the Acropolis is the Propylaea, and that's the main entranceway into the Acropolis. And once again, when you go and visit there, there's lots of crowds all the time. And then right next to it is this Temple of Nike. And I asked my students to notice, like, what's different about Nike's temple than Athena's temple? And most people say that it is small, and that's correct. It's a small little temple. And the reason why it's a small little temple is because Nike is a minor goddess. In fact, that there's no known stories about Nike. Right? She's just the goddess of wisdom. There's no story telling how she was born or what she did or anything. In fact, I want to show you something back here. That's Nike that Athena is holding in her hand right there, and that's Nike, and then that's Nike right there. All right, so let's go back over to Nike. All right, and then I'm going to share with you something that's really cool video. If you go to YouTube and type in "Let's visit the Parthenon," and it'll give you this video right here. Let's visit the Parthenon, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And I don't know if you know what Assassin's Creed is, but it is a video game. So we're going to go and take a look at this video for just a second. All right, so you're not able to hear the audio for this, but because I'm speaking through a mic and a headset. But what is really cool about this video, and you can watch it, and there is a great soundtrack to this, and the guy's talking, he's telling you all about these different buildings. And so the beginning of it, you're just an eagle flying around looking at the Parthenon, and then a little bit later you can walk around and see the buildings and go and visit them, and then walk and see if we can look at that. Isn't that cool? That's just so cool. I'm just so amazed at this video game that this looks like the closest thing I could get to, like a time machine to go back to ancient Rome or ancient Greece and walk around on the Acropolis at Athens. All right, here you can go inside these temples. Look at that. That's Artemis right there. That is the goddess of hunting. Oh, I gave away something that we're going to look at later. All right. Anyways, go and check out this video. It is so cool. You'll walk around the Acropolis. All right. So I'm going to get back to our. All right, so here I am back at the PowerPoint. All right, we're going to move on. All right, so I don't know if you remember when I told you the story of Oedipus Rex, the guy that killed his father and married his mother. Well, a lot of that story took place at Delphi, and that's kind of why I told you that story. Well, Delphi was an actual place, and that's what it looks like. And I had a student visit there as well. But there's an aerial view of the Delphi, and I don't know if you like. Right here is the temple, and then right here is the stadium, and then here is the theater right there. So this is the temple of Apollo, and here are some other buildings that are around there, and then this is the stadium right here, the seats, the rows of seats, and then this right here is the beginning of the stadium, and then this right here is the theater that they have at Delphi. And that's a photograph that my student brought back of the theater, not the theater, the stadium. All right, another thing I want to talk to you guys about is the pediment sculpture. And pediment, the definition right is right here. It's a shelf above the columns that holds sculptures. Um, you can pause the video to write that down. But this is the pediment right across here, and these are the sculptures that it holds up. And I want you to notice that as the sculptures get to the middle, they either get taller or they stand up straight. And down here in the corners, these sculptures kind of sit down or they lie down if they're way into the side. And then the whole thing together makes a triangle. And here's a drawing of what they would like. I believe that this one is that one. Yeah, it's the same one. And this is a clearer drawing of what it would have looked like. And so when you go to an art museum and you see some Greek sculptures that go in a triangle like this, you'll know that they come from a pediment, and it comes from the side of the pediment where the people are squinched down into the triangle. Here's a guy. He would have been at the very end of the triangle right here. These are pediment sculptures. Pediment sculptures. All right, and then also I want to talk about relief sculptures, and write this definition down. Relief is a sculpture carved into a wall or a flat surface. And a good example of a relief sculpture are like coins that you have in your pocket, like a quarter or a dime that you would put into a vending machine. All right, and there's a couple different kinds of relief. There's high relief that comes out far from the wall, and you can tell that this comes out far from the wall because it has a heavy shadow in it. And then there's low relief, which only comes out a little bit from the wall. And again, the coins that are in your pocket is a good example of low relief. All right, and then there's relief sculptures all over Greek art. You know, they have it in their cemeteries. And so instead of having a stone that has words on it, they have a stone that has pictures on it. And then in their architecture above the columns, they have these things called metopes that have little relief sculptures in them. And then this altar of Zeus, by the way, this altar was once on this hill, and they took it apart piece by piece and rebuilt it inside of a museum. Hang on. You got it? All right. Hi. You doing all right? How are you? All right, and so I think that was always interesting that they have they were able to recreate this temple inside of an art museum, and even you can walk around it and see it up close. What I would love about this temple of Zeus is that they have these relief sculptures that go around the sides of it. I love this one right here. This is Athena right here in the middle, and you can tell it's Athena not just because it says that down here, but because she's wearing her aegis right here, and she has a shield, and then she's really kicking ass because she is the goddess of war. Were there little metal pencil sharpeners in that?
Oh no,
Little pencil sharpeners.
yeah. No. You watch.
All right.
Yeah. No, nothing. There is nothing.
Okay, so 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. All right, so let me introduce you to the altar of Zeus. This is a pretty interesting building right here, and it used to be outside right here. And they've taken apart piece by piece and then rebuilt it inside of this museum. I think this is in Germany, maybe. Anyways, what I'm showing this to you for is because of all the wonderful reliefs that go all the way around it. And I think they're really incredible. Look at that. Uh, really cool reliefs right here. And then I love this one. This one's one of my favorites of all time. And this is Athena kicking ass. And the reason why I know that it's Athena is not just because it's labeled so, but because it shows her Aegis right here. That's the Aegis, and she has a shield. And here she is pulling this guy's hair, and I love that face right there. It's very emotional face right there. And I like the way the hair curls and stuff. Shows a lot of movement and energy. All right, and then let's skip into early Greek sculpture and write down this definition. So, Kouros is an early Greek sculpture of a nude male. Now, does that look Greek to you? No, that's Egyptian. But look at that. So look at his pose right there. And notice that his face is facing forward, the shoulders are facing forward, the feet are facing forward. His hands are straight down by his side, his hands are in fists, and the left foot is forward. And then the Greek is in the exact same position. The head is facing forward, the chest is facing forward, the arms are straight down in fists, and then the left foot is forward. And then here, let me show you. This gives you a little idea of just how big these things are. And this is how a stone sculpture is made. First of all, you have a big block of stone, and then you draw your picture on it. You draw what it's going to be carved, and you slowly rough it out until you get to the sculpture of what you want. And these are the tools that a stone sculptor uses. These are hammers, and then these are chisels, and these are files. And there's different kinds of chisels. So a big chisel like these over here knocks off big parts of the stone. And then uh, sculptors will often put their stone on sandbags, and the sandbags absorb the shock because when you hit on a tool into a stone, it causes little vibrations to go into the stone, and that causes the stone to break on the inside. So sculptors use sandbags to help absorb that vibration. Now this chisel right here is called a point, and that's it right there. It kind of looks like a giant metal pencil, and it is also used for knocking off big blocks of stone. This one right here is called the tooth chisel. I don't know if you can see it has a jagged edge right there, almost like a fork. And that gets these little marks right here were caused by that tooth chisel. And then they would use a flat chisel after that, and then they use a file to make it all nice and smooth. But nowadays, sculptors usually use a pneumatic tool, and that is a like you ever see when they do road construction when they're breaking up a sidewalk or a street, they use a jackhammer. Well, this is like a miniature jackhammer, and it's a lot more efficient at carving stone. All right, I want to show you just how cartoony these Kuros sculptures are. Look at how stylized the hair is. It doesn't look very realistic. And the chest is very stylized, and the abdomen is very stylized. And then the elbows are even stylized, and the knees are very stylized. It's not very realistic. It's almost like a cartoon of a person instead of an actual. All right, and then the other version of uh, the early Greek sculptures, the female version, is called a kore, Kore. And this is what a kore looks like. Usually she's clothed, but she still has her hand and as a fist down by the side. Her feet are forward, her face is forward, her chest is forward. And look at how stylized that hair is. That hair reminds me of um, uh, what do you call it? The noodles that you get in the store. I'm having a brain fart. Ramen, right? The ramen before you cook it. She's got ramen hair. There's the back of her stylized hair, and the feet are very stylized. It's not very natural. And then on this picture right here, I just look at how much of a block of stone that she looks like. All right. The folds in the clothes all go in a straight line. The feet are very blocky. The hands are very blocky. The head is very blocky. It's just not very woman like. It looks like a block of stone. This one right here, so this is, by the way, this is right before Greek art. So this is before Greek. This is early Greek. This is the Kouré that I was talking to you about. And even though it's still very stylized, look at how the hair goes around the curves of the body. It has, a little bit more sensitivity to nature and a little bit more sensitivity to realism. And the clothes go a little bit, they're a little bit more natural how they go around the body. And then this is late Greek sculpture. And notice how the form is completely free of the block of stone. That look at how her arms come out from the body. They're not always or attached to the body anymore. Look at how the weight is shifted from one foot and the feet are pointing in different angles. Look at how the head is tilted a little bit and looking away. And look at how the hips are at an angle. When you put your weight on one foot right here, it causes that hip to go up and the other one to go down, causing a change in the hips, a tilt in the hips. And this woman right here has zero tilt in her hips. So this one is a lot more natural. And then look at how the clothes kind of fit around the body. And then these clothes actually look like stone. So as time progresses, Greeks get better and better at making their sculptures look more and more natural. All right, so one of the problems, oh, by the way, copy this down. One of the problems with Greek metal sculptures is that there's not many of them left around. The reason why there's not many bronze sculptures that are Greek left around is because when the Romans conquered the Greeks, they looked at all these Greek sculptures and they liked the sculptures, but they also saw the metal as something that they can melt down and make weapons out of. So what they did is they made copies out of the sculptures. They made stone copies, and after they made the stone copy, they melted down the Greek bronze sculpture to make armor, swords, weapons, and etc. So the bronze sculptures that we're about to look at, there's very few of them in the world. Oh, so here's how a bronze sculpture is made. So first you make a sculpture out of wax. And then you cover that where you put tubes into that wax sculpture, and you cover that wax sculpture in it's kind of like plaster of Paris. And what happens to wax when you heat it up? It melts. And in this situation, it's going to melt and come out of those tubes. And then you fill those tubes with molten bronze. And so that when you take that plaster off, this is what your sculpture looks like. It's not very pleasant. So you have to clean up, and so you cut off all the tubes and you clean it up, and eventually you have your bronze sculpture. And that's how bronze sculptures are made. Here, excuse me, I'm sorry. Here is a red figure vase showing you how the Greeks made their bronze statues. So this right here was is their oven, and they are cooking, or they are melting bronze in there. So they have this very hot coals that are in there, and then they have this tool that has bronze on the end. Up here are molds. This is a mold of a little person, a mold of a horse, a mold of a head, and there's tools hanging up on the wall. Here's a hand that's been made, a foot that's been made, and then here are they're assembling a sculpture here. Uh,
Miss Finley, Miss Jessica Finley, if you are in the building, please come to the front. Miss Jessica Finley, if you're in the building, please come to the front.
Here's a sculpture here that's been made out of bronze, and it's kind of like a almost like a mannequin. I don't know if you've ever seen a mannequin that's been taken apart. Well, this is it looks like this. So you would attach the head, attach the hands, etc. And then here is an X-ray of a Greek bronze statue where they've X-rayed the hand, and you can see where it's been almost like welded on the inside and a spike put through. So these are put together as parts and not as a whole. You know, you don't cast the whole thing, you cast it in parts and then you put it together. So here are some Greek bronzes. This guy is a Olympic athlete. Can you tell what sport he plays? If you look closely at his hands, you can tell that he's a boxer. Oh, there's Zeus. What do you think he's throwing? He's probably throwing a lightning bolt. And I've told you stories about Zeus, and he's always in trouble, and he's caused so much trouble. Like this right here. Uh, you know, what are what causes the most problems in Greek mythology? You know, green represents hubris, and hubris means excessive pride. Or and the pink represents fate, prophecy that couldn't be avoided. Just like what I told you about with Oedipus Rex, there was a prophecy and they tried to avoid it, but it came back and got them anyway. And then, or some god threw a hissy fit because a human was better than he. So, but then all these problems, all the blue is caused by Zeus having affairs. So that's what it was like with Zeus. All right, he was not a good boyfriend slash husband slash brother, and almost none of the gods were good people. All right, here's some more Greek bronzes. Oh, these two guys were found at the bottom of the ocean. So here's a photograph of divers bringing them up from the bottom of the ocean, and there they are on the boat, and then um, they had to clean them up. They had all kinds of growth on them, and this is before they cleaned up the Riachi warriors, and then this is after they cleaned up the Riachi warriors. And then I want you to write down this definition right here: the sculptor of the Getty bronze. And this is another one that they found at the bottom of the ocean. And when they first found it, it looked like this, and then after they cleaned it up, it looked like that. Oh, and then I also want you to know contrapposto, the S-shaped curve the body makes when leaning on one foot. So when you lean on one foot, that makes the hip tilt up. So you have it like a tilted hip right here, and then that causes the body to lean a little bit this way, which causes the neck to lean a little bit this way, which causes the head to lean a little bit that way, and that is the contrapposto pose. All right, so that's just a little bit of factoid right there that the statues were originally painted. But these sculptures I'm about to show you are Roman copies of Greek bronzes. If you remember how I told you that the Romans liked the Greek bronzes, but they also wanted to make weapons out of them. So they made copies out of stone and then melted down the bronze. So these are Roman copies of Greek bronze sculptures. Another thing I want to show you is Notice the little bit of stone that's attached that attaches the hand to the shoulder, and that is to keep the arm. See these this part has come off. It's broken off, and that's what this is supposed to stop that from happening. Stop it from breaking off, and then you'll see these trees, like these weird tree trunks. Like this tree trunk grows right into this guy's leg, and that's weird because trees shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have a tree growing into your leg. But the purpose of that is to keep this from breaking apart. It's a little bit of support. Um, Stone is a very brittle thing, and if you have these small ankles and small wrists and small necks, and that's usually the places where things break. So the sculptors would attach things to attach the wrist to the hip so that there's a less chance of the hand breaking off, and they attach these tree trunks to the legs so there's a less chance of it breaking apart. There's an Amazon. There's the Kyoto boy. This is Artemis. She's the goddess of the hunt. And that's Hermes. He's the messenger god. He delivers messages and he has these winged feet. Sometimes he has a helmet with wings on it that allows him to fly and travel. Poseidon, the god of the ocean and sea. And there's Apollo, the sun god. And this story right here is the it's called Phaethon's Ride, and Phaethon is Apollo's son, and it was coming up to Phaethon's birthday, and Apollo asked his son, "What do you want for your birthday? I'll give you anything you wish for." And his son says, "Okay, Dad, I want to drive your chariot." By the way, Apollo he rides the sun chariot across the sky from east to west, and that's why the sun goes from east to west. You know your science teacher has told you that that's a big giant ball of nuclear explosions giving off light to the Earth, but that's not true. That's actually Apollo in his sun chariot going from east to west. Anyway, Apollo says anything but that. The horses are too wild. They're too crazy. You won't be able to control them. But his son says, "No, Dad. That's all I want for my birthday is to drive the chariot." So his father finally relents and says, "Okay." And on the day of Phaethon's birthday, Apollo sits him down and teaches him how to control the horses. He says, "Okay, on this part of the ride, you have to hold the reins like this. On that part of the ride, you have to hold the reins like that." And he's given him all these instructions. And the whole time, Phaethon's like, "Yeah, yeah, Dad, I got it, I got it. Now let me try." And so when it's time, Phaethon gets into the chariot, and immediately the horses are out of control. They're going up and down and left and right, and too high and too low, and they're just absolutely out of control. And the horses go way, 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 way up too high, and the little embers coming out from the back of the sun chariot create the stars in the heavens. And the horses go way, way, way too low, and the sun chariot scorches the earth and creates the Sahara Desert. And up and down and left and right, he's out of control. And eventually, Phaethon falls out of the chariot. And at that point, Apollo comes in, takes control of the horses, gets them under control, and finishes the ride of Phaethon. And that's what that red figure base shows. So here's a sculpture of Apollo. Another sculpture of Apollo. Not only is he the sun god, but he's also the god of music. And then there's Heracles. Now, notice that Heracles looks very different in these two pictures. And that's simply because it's done by two different artists at two different times, and they're just working with whatever model they've got. So this Heracles looks very swole and buff and like aggressive. This one looks like a young boy. Both of them have the lion skin. So there's the lion skin right there. Here's the lion skin, and both of them have the club, the olive branch club. So there's the club, and then here's the club. And there's Zeus. We've talked about Zeus. And there's Athena. There's the Aegis, Athena's breastplate. There's Aegis with Medusa's head. There's Medusa's head. There's Athena with her helmet and spear and shield, and there's the Aegis. And there's Hermes. We talked about Hermes. He's the oh, by the way, yeah, this is about Dionysus. So that's little baby Dionysus right there. And I believe that Hermes was holding up some grapes because Dionysus is the god of wine and parties. So here's Dionysus with a cup of wine holding some grapes. Here's Dionysus with grapes in his hair. He's holding up grapes. This guy's actually got a glass of wine. He's got grapes on his feet. And Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, the most beautiful goddess. I thought that was funny. I put it in there. I like this sculpture because it has a lot of emotion in it. These guys are about to get uh, their village is being overrun with the enemy, and instead of being killed by the enemy and having his wife raped by the enemy, he kills her and he kills himself before the enemy can get to him. Anyways, during World War II, this sculpture was in the museum. They couldn't get it out of the museum. And in World War II, cities were being bombed indiscriminately. And there was a very high chance that art museums would be bombed and all the artworks inside would be destroyed. And so most museums were able to relocate paintings, but for large sculptures like this, they couldn't move them very fast. So in this case, they just covered it in sandbags and hope for the best. I love this sculpture because it's so very dynamic and interesting. And dynamic, I mean, it's full of action. So and is but Laocoon tried to warn the Trojans that the Greeks were hiding inside the horse. And Poseidon, who is angry at the Trojans, sent out these two sea serpents to kill Laocoon and his two sons. And that's what's happening here. Oh, I found these. These are like Greek sculptures that looks like they're taking selfies. And I thought that was funny. Somebody photographed these sculptures to make it look like they're taking selfies. And then Discobolos. This is a sculpture that I want you guys to remember. I want you to sketch this out, remember it. Oh, so I want to talk about the composition of this. Notice the big nice curve right here, this arc, and then there's another arc right here, and then another arc right here. This is like what a perfect example of dynamic sculpture. That is, and look at how his body's twisting as he's throwing this discus. Like it is really full of action. It is not a boring sculpture. He's right in the middle of the action. I found these online. I thought these were funny. And then this one I thought was hilarious. This is how my daughters do dishes. All right, because every time I come in from them doing dishes, the place is a mess. All right, that's funny, right? Not funny? Is it funny? All right. And then Nike of Samothrace, very famous sculpture. One of the like this is one of the most famous sculptures in the world, and this is one of the most famous sculptures in the world. So this is Nike, the goddess of victory, and she's missing her head and she's missing her arms, but the wind is blowing her dress around, and this is what she looks like in the gallery that's in the Louvre. And that's a big room to have your sculpture in. And that's what she looks like from behind. And during the war, when they had to relocate her, this is how they did it. They built a ramp on the stairs, and they moved her down the stairs. They built like a crate around her. Now, a lot of people wonder what her head and arms were doing. So this is one interpretation of what her arms and head were doing. And this is another interpretation. Here's another interpretation. So who knows? Nobody really knows. And then the last artwork I want to show you is Venus de Milo. And this is probably one of the most famous sculptures ever. I put in a couple of jokes that on this one. It says, I was young, I needed money. And so the joke there is that she sold her arms for money. This guy says, baby, you'd look like Venus de Milo if you let me cut your arms off. And that's a really creepy thing to say. And she's smiling. She thinks that's funny. And then she's jealous of the Shiva sculpture that's next to her. But here's somebody, they sculpted what they think that she looked like.
All right, that's it for today. And until next time, be a little art factory.